Judge Rathjen publicly ridicules twin black sisters. The court is shocked when they reveal elite U.S. Army training. You think the law is on your side? In my courtroom, I am the law. Judge Rathjen scoffed, his smirk full of arrogance. For years, he ruled with unchecked power, silencing anyone who dared to challenge him. He thought today would be no different, that the two black sisters standing before him were just another case to crush under his gavel. But what he didn't know was that they had faced far worse battles than this. And this time, he was the one about to lose everything. The old courthouse in the small city of Maplewood, Pennsylvania, didn't look like much from the outside. Its worn brick facade and Greek Revival columns conveyed a kind of grand, if faded, authority. Inside, though, tension thrived. Hallways teemed with murmured conversations, tenants disputing evictions, families in custody battles, attorneys flipping through thick stacks of documents. Outside Courtroom B, two young women hovered by a bench in the corridor, shoulders drawn back, eyes calm, but faces set with tension. They were identical twins, Elodie and Anya Franklin, both tall, both with hair in meticulously braided coils pinned into buns at the nape of their necks, each wearing a conservative dark suit. At first glance, they appeared to be just another pair of well-prepared litigants, but anyone who took a moment to look into their eyes would have sensed something steeled behind them. Discipline, self-possession, and unspoken resolve. A short distance down the hallway, passers-by gawked. Elodie and Anya were the talk of Maplewood that day, though they had never sought such a spotlight. The chatter revolved around the notion that these two black sisters would dare challenge Judge Herbert E. Rathjen, a man infamous for his sneering remarks, old-school prejudices, and arrogant sense of his own power. No one in Maplewood had successfully confronted Rathjen's open displays of bigotry. Most who tried left the courtroom humiliated or with an unexpected legal penalty. Elodie fiddled with the corner of a manila folder, which contained crucial documents about their late grandmother's estate. She and Anya were in a messy legal dispute over property lines. It should have been a routine hearing to ensure they were not stripped of the farmland their grandmother had purchased decades ago, but it had spiraled. The talk of zoning regulations had mutated into a moral and immoral battlefield, culminating in their appearance before the notoriously racist judge. Anya exhaled slowly. "You ready?" she asked, voice tinged with subdued nerves. Elodie pursed her lips. "We've been through worse. All we can do is present our case." Yet, as she said these words, she recalled a swirl of memories, the labyrinthine obstacles they'd faced even trying to become the rightful owners of their grandmother's farmland, the suspicious glares from neighbors who doubted they had the means or the knowledge to maintain the land, and the pointed remarks from attorneys claiming they lacked proper documentation. She also remembered the countless times they'd stood fast under pressure, including during service on the scorching sands of another continent when they were both in the U.S. Army. Yes, they had been through worse indeed. When the twins stepped into Courtroom B, they observed the arrangement. A wood-paneled wall behind a tall bench, a stiff American flag angled near the judge's seat, and an equally stiff bailiff commanding the gallery to rise. Judge Herbert E. Rathjen was a tall, gaunt man with silver hair combed back so that not a single strand fell out of place. He eyed the sisters with an expression that combined condescension and a sneer of disbelief, an expression that said, "How dare these two come into my courtroom?" All was silent except for the grating squeak of the judge's leather chair as he settled in. Everyone else stood. The bailiff recited the typical opening, concluding with, "Please be seated." From the start, Rathjen zeroed in on Elodie's upright posture and calm bearing. He cast a pointed glance at her. "Miss Franklin, is it?" She nodded politely. "Yes, Your Honor." Elodie Franklin, representing myself and my sister, Miss Anya Franklin. Judge Rathjen's lips twitched upward in a mocking half-smile. "Rather unusual, representing yourselves." "No, attorney." Anya cleared her throat. "We're well-versed in the law for this matter, sir. We have everything we need." "Well-versed," Rathjen repeated in a drawl that was dripping with skepticism. "I see. And you've come to dispute my earlier ruling that your property is in violation of Maplewood's zoning regulations." Elodie responded respectfully. "Yes, Your Honor. We'd like the record to show that the property lines have been recognized as farmland for over 50 years. We have the original documentation from 1971, and this hearing should confirm that the farmland remains in our name without additional zoning restrictions." Rathjen's eyes seemed to darken with every word she spoke. Let me guess, he said with a theatrical sigh. This farmland has what special meaning for you? You're telling me you deserve an exception. There is no exception, Anya said calmly. We're simply reaffirming what's already been established. The judge let out a mirthless chuckle. Simply reaffirming. He repeated again, as though tasting the words and finding them ridiculous. His gaze swept the gallery, taking in the smattering of onlookers who had come out of curiosity. Then his eyes landed back on the twins. I find it intriguing that you believe you can reinterpret the law to your convenience. This time, Elodie bristled. We're not reinterpreting anything. We're citing the documents our grandmother left us, along with Maplewood's farmland preservation statutes. They protect farmland from certain zoning regulations if the land has been used for farming for more than 20 consecutive years. Rathjen's eyes narrowed. You sure talk a good game, Miss Franklin. But I see something in your eyes. Rebellion? A difficulty with authority, perhaps? Now I'm curious. What exactly do you do for a living, Miss Franklin? And you, Miss Franklin? He pointed from Elodie to Anya. Anya swallowed carefully. We currently run a small business. Our grandmother left us farmland that we want to restore. That's the reason we're here, to confirm our right to continue the farm's operations without external intrusion. In this small business, you wouldn't be out of your depth, would you? Rathjen's question seeped with condescension, as though people like them had no place in business or farmland. Elodie and Anya exchanged a look, deciding silently that they would not yet reveal the extent of their backgrounds. The judge didn't need to know about their U.S. Army service or how they'd both recently returned to Maplewood after their tours in conflict zones overseas. They wanted the hearing to proceed purely on the merits of the farmland documents. But Rathjen sensed that quiet confidence in them. It made him suspicious, perhaps even threatened. A slight flush crept up his neck, and the overhead fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on his face. We'll continue, he said abruptly, flipping open a file. But I warn you both. These so-called farmland preservation statutes might not apply if you can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the land is in your name and has been used consistently as farmland. Anya lifted the manila envelope. We have the evidence here, Your Honor. Signed statements from the prior caretaker, receipts for seed distribution. He waved a dismissive hand. We'll get to that. First, I'll hear from the Maplewood Zoning Committee's representative, Mr. Davies. A tall, stocky man in a navy suit shuffled forward. Yes, Your Honor. Let's get down to the alleged violations, Rathjen commanded. I see you're citing that Miss Franklin and Miss Franklin have not complied with certain fencing regulations and refused to pay additional property taxes on the new classification of the land. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Elodie could feel her stomach nodding. She knew these charges were trumped-up nonsense. The farmland had been recognized for decades, and Maplewood's farmland codes had never required them to pay taxes at the level of a commercial or residential property. But the zoning committee had abruptly tried to reclassify the land to push them off it, likely because they saw an opportunity for development deals. Yes, well, Rathjen began, tapping the pen on his desk. I'm quite certain these two young women have no real legal background. Perhaps they stumbled onto farmland that they can't manage. Let's hear the facts. So what if their grandmother owned it? It means nothing if the official reclassification has already been decided. He smirked. We have rules for a reason. Elodie clenched her fists beneath the table, but she kept her expression neutral. Another surge of memory rushed at her. Her army training and de-escalation, how she'd calmly kept her cool in the face of a commander who'd once doubted her capabilities because of her size and gender. She took a slow, measured breath and prepared for the fight. Throughout that morning session, Elodie and Anya tried to lay out the facts in a measured, logical manner. They presented documents from Maplewood's own records showing farmland designations that dated back decades. They brandished statements from neighbors attesting to the farmland's continuity. They had an affidavit from their grandmother's best friend, who had watched them labor every summer with planting and harvest since they were children. Yet each time they spoke, Judge Rathjen's eyebrows rose with what could only be described as contempt. He peppered them with questions that were neither relevant nor respectful. Why do you assume you can handle farmland as well as train professionals? Do you think Maplewood's rules should bend for you? Isn't it possible that you're simply not from around here and don't understand how we do things? Anya, usually the calmer of the two, found her composure cracking as Rathjen delivered the last line. Our grandmother lived here most of her life, she countered, voice surprisingly steady. We were raised here as well, until we left for college. We have every right. Rathjen chuckled darkly. Yes, we all have so-called rights. But Maplewood is a very particular place, Miss Franklin. We have expectations about how farmland is handled and who handles it. Tradition matters. Some folks see that farmland, see new faces, and wonder if they'll keep it up to standard. New faces. The words hung in the air. The quiet hush in the courtroom magnified their meaning. Elodie could sense the subdued gasps from some onlookers who understood exactly what Rathjen was implying. He might as well have said, "We don't want black owners of farmland in Maplewood." Her heart hammered. She eyed her sister, who gave a tiny nod, as if to say, "We'll handle this." Sensing a moment of tension, the bailiff cleared his throat. Rathjen waved him off and continued, "Let's keep going. Miss Franklin, you said you had documents." Elodie moved to present the affidavit, but before she could, Rathjen flicked an imperious hand. "That's enough for now. We'll break for lunch. This hearing will resume promptly at 1:30. The twins barely had a chance to protest. Rathjen stood. The bailiff commanded all to rise, and in moments, the judge whisked himself away behind the door to his chambers. As the sisters stepped out into the midday sun, the air felt heavy. Maplewood's downtown area was quaint, lined with small storefronts, a family-run diner, a used bookstore, a hardware shop, clustered together around the courthouse. Everywhere they looked, they sensed eyes on them. Maplewood wasn't an extremely large community, and news traveled quickly. The tension with Judge Rathjen was no secret. Rather than let it bother them, they focused on what needed to be done. "We'll talk to Mr. Davies from the zoning committee," said Elodie, shading her eyes from the bright sun. "Maybe we can come to some agreement that the judge can't just dismiss." Anya nodded, though she hardly believed Rathjen would see reason. "He's determined to bury us," she thought. "But he doesn't know us." That last line left her lips in a whisper. The sisters found themselves walking to a cafe a few blocks away. On the way, they passed Maplewood's Veterans Memorial Park, a small plot with flags fluttering in the breeze, and a lone statue commemorating soldiers from the area who had served in various conflicts. At the base of the statue, people had left wreaths and small flags. For a moment, Elodie and Anya paused. Anya inhaled quietly. "I can't believe how people in this town think they know us," she murmured, blinking back memories of her days in the army. "They don't realize we've sacrificed for this country. We've served. We've put our lives on the line. Yet the judge had the audacity to treat them like ungrateful strangers." Elodie placed a gentle hand on the statue's plaque. "Sometimes," she said softly, "people see what they want to see. But we know who we are." They stood in silence for a moment longer, heads bowed in quiet respect. Then, resolute, they continued down the sidewalk. Inside the small, rustic cafe, the tantalizing aroma of fresh coffee swirled with the soft hum of conversation. Elodie and Anya found a small table near the window. Their plan was to gather themselves, review their documents, and brace for the afternoon session. Across the cafe, the door swung open, letting in a brief flurry of sunshine, and with it, a group of local Maplewood officials, including the zoning committee's Mr. Davies. The stocky man spotted them immediately. With a faint grimace, he walked over to their table, coffee cup in hand. Miss Franklin," he greeted. He had the strained politeness of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "Do you mind if I have a quick word?" "Of course," Elodie said, gesturing to a spare chair. He sat, eyes roving over their papers. "I can see you're serious about this farmland. You two have actually done your homework." The corners of Anya's mouth tightened. "We're not incompetent," she said, a bit of a testy edge creeping in. Davies held up a placating hand. "I didn't say that. But you have to understand Maplewood's perspective. The farmland's been idle, no major yields. The committee saw an opening to reclassify it, potentially bring in developers for new housing. Maplewood needs expansion, you see, new tax revenue." Elodie stiffened. "I see. So you found farmland run by an elderly woman, and you thought no one would notice if you took it away. But now that we're stepping in, you're doubling down." Davies nodded slowly, as if verifying that she'd read the situation correctly. "I can't speak for the entire committee, but yeah, that's basically it. I suspect Judge Rathjen has, let's say, other motivations in making sure you lose this case. But to be honest, Maplewood would benefit financially from reclassification. If it helps you at all." The judge's words earlier, they were out of line. "That's an understatement," Anya said sharply. Just watch your backs, Davies said, lowering his voice. Rathjen hates being challenged, especially by people he perceives as outsiders. Neither twin missed the loaded meaning behind people he perceives as outsiders. Still, they appreciated the small admission from Davies. Maybe not all was lost. After a moment, Davies rose. Anyway, I'll see you in there. Good luck. He left without another word. Elodie tapped her pen against the edge of her notebook. So, it's about money and bigotry. No surprise. Let's keep our strategy. We have everything in place to prove it's farmland. If Rathjen tries to forcibly reclassify it, it's a violation of state farmland preservation acts. The sisters quietly sipped their drinks, letting a determined silence settle over them. Outside, the sun climbed higher, and the hush of the cafe was punctuated by clinking cups and low chatter. They both knew that the real battle was only just beginning. Entering courtroom B for the afternoon session, Elodie and Anya discovered something new. The gallery was fuller. Word had spread through Maplewood that the twin sisters were standing up to Judge Rathjen. People whispered about an out-of-town blog reporter who might cover the case. Even a few townspeople who had suffered Rathjen's scorn in the past now showed up out of curiosity, wondering if at last someone could topple the self-styled tyrant. The bailiffs, all rise, snapped the room to attention. Rathjen strode in, black robe billowing behind him. He settled into his chair with the same smugness as before, flipping casually through a few pages on his desk. We'll resume, he announced. Miss Franklin, do you have further evidence to present? Elodie stood, chin high. Yes, Your Honor. She approached the bench, carefully passing up the original farmland deed along with affidavits from neighbors. Rathjen cast them a cursory glance before setting them aside. He cleared his throat. I see. Long-time farmland, blah blah. Are you actually practicing agriculture there? Because as far as I can tell, you've been gone for years, doing who knows what. Anya rose. We were serving, Your Honor. We were in the United States Army. A hush fell across the gallery. Rathjen's expression froze for a moment, perhaps taken aback, but then his lips curled. So you say? And this is relevant how? Anya's calm exterior faltered. It's relevant because you're implying we abandoned the property. We didn't. Our grandmother leased it to a local caretaker while we served our country overseas. We both served multiple tours, and we're proud of that, sir. Rathjen's eyes gleamed. Some might have mistaken that look for respect, but it was anything but pride. He echoed, voice dripping with disdain. Well, I'm sure your grandmother was proud. But the question remains, was the farmland truly being used as farmland, or was it left fallow? Because the caretaker's name is not on this affidavit. Elodie reached for another file. We have evidence from the caretaker that the land was used for limited seasonal crops. The caretaker's father took ill, so the farmland was not as productive as it once was, but it was still farmland by classification. The judge exhaled, a theatrical sound that reverberated through the silent courtroom. Then, turning his cold gaze on the twins, he delivered a sneer that would soon become infamous. You know, I don't appreciate people waltzing in here claiming they served our country, expecting a free pass. A uniform doesn't guarantee you special privileges, Miss Franklin, especially not in my courtroom. A faint gasp rippled through the gallery. Elodie felt her throat tighten. She inhaled, letting the tension wash over her, remembering the strict discipline hammered into her during Army training. Maintain composure. Breathe. She'd faced more dangerous threats than this judge. Anya was the one who spoke. We're not asking for special treatment, Your Honor. We just want fairness under the law. Judge Rathjen looked almost eager to respond. Fairness, is it? Let's see if you can handle what real fairness means. I'll read Maplewood Zoning Committee's resolution, then we'll see if you still think you have a case. Rathjen took his time reading from a set of documents, explaining that the farmland was to be reclassified unless the sisters could prove within a 30-day period that they had complied with every farmland code, some of which were newly revised and had never been applied so rigorously to any other farmland. But Rathjen insisted they had to meet these updated codes without an extension. If they failed, they'd lose farmland status, triggering higher property taxes, or risk having the farmland seized if they couldn't pay. The caretaker's signature alone won't cut it, Rathjen concluded. We need inspectors, soil samples, multiple statements from recognized farmers within Maplewood. The caretaker's father, or whoever else, he's not recognized by the Maplewood Agricultural Board. Elodie stepped forward. Your Honor, this is unprecedented. I've never heard of farmland owners being required to produce so many additional documents. The farmland preservation laws at the state level Rathjen cut her off. Perhaps you didn't hear me, he said icily. These are Maplewood's rules. This is Maplewood's jurisdiction. If you don't like it, you're free to try your luck in the appellate court, but good luck with that. They rarely overturn local zoning decisions. He scanned the gallery, his lips quirking into a sort of malicious grin. Then he focused again on the sisters. Need I remind you that I am the law here? That was the moment it shifted for Elodie and Anya. Until now, they had tried to keep their personal history under wraps, focusing solely on the farmland. But they recognized that Rathjen would continue to move the goalposts, inventing new rules to push them out. He was weaponizing his authority to degrade them in front of the entire community. Anya inhaled deeply. Your Honor, if I may, we did not come here to ask for special treatment, but I won't stand here and let you twist the law to suit your personal biases. We swore an oath to defend this country. Rathjen's laugh cut through her words. Don't speak to me of oaths. I've been administering justice longer than you've been alive. An uneasy stirring moved through the gallery. For a moment, Elodie's mind wandered back to the day she signed her own enlistment papers, the pride she felt, the knowledge that she and her sister were stepping into a life of service. Now, confronted by this contemptuous figure, she felt something elemental rise within her. She straightened her shoulders and addressed Rathjen directly. Yes, Your Honor, you've had a long tenure, but that doesn't make your actions just. We're not leaving Maplewood, and we're not giving up our farmland. The law is on our side. Rathjen's nostrils flared. He glared at the sisters. I've had about enough of your insolence. Then came the line that would later go down in Maplewood's local lore. You two can strut around here with your so-called army background, but I see you for what you really are. Don't think your color and your uniform will intimidate me. A shocked silence swallowed the courtroom. The bailiff visibly tensed, uncertain how to respond. The gallery collectively held its breath. That moment felt as though it stretched into an eternity, an unfiltered, blatant display of racism from the bench, one that even the most jaded in Maplewood had never heard so openly. A lesser set of individuals might have broken down or launched into fury, but Elodie and Anya had been steeled by experiences few people in Maplewood could imagine. They had navigated war zones, diffused bombs, and endured the constant threat of sniper fire. They had dragged wounded comrades to safety under blistering sun, negotiated with local interpreters in villages, and studied advanced combat training at Fort Benning. This moment in a small Pennsylvania courthouse was small compared to that. Anya's voice trembled, not with fear, but with carefully contained anger. Your Honor, you are out of line. Rathjen actually leaned forward, a sneer etched on his face. Careful, Miss Franklin. Elodie stepped in, her voice calm. No, you be careful, sir. Because once this is over, we'll make sure people know what's happening in Maplewood's courthouse. She turned slightly, letting her gaze sweep the gallery. All of these people will be witnesses to your bigotry. Rathjen's hand slammed down on his desk. Bailiff, that's enough. Clear the courtroom, except for the parties involved. This hearing is going into closed session. A flurry of startled movement ensued, with the bailiff ordering spectators to leave. The sisters watched as the public was forced out. Among them, a local blogger tried to protest. Wait, we have a right too. But the bailiff insisted he leave. The door slammed shut, sealing them in with Rathjen, the court reporter, and zoning committee counsel. Rathjen looked triumphant. Now we proceed on my terms. Miss Franklin and Miss Franklin, I suggest you think carefully before flinging accusations at me. A judge can hold you in contempt. Elodie said nothing, though her glare spoke volumes. Here's how this will go, Rathjen continued. You'll produce the required inspections, signatures, and any other nonsense I request within 30 days. Otherwise, the farmland reclassification stands. Understood. Anya crossed her arms. This is entirely outside the scope of contempt, Rathjen said softly, tapping his gavel. Shall I continue? Silence. Finally, Elodie nodded. We understand, she bit out. But do not think we will stand idly by. Rathjen dismissed the sisters. The hearing is adjourned. You have your instructions. Court reporter, end the record now. With that, the hearing was over, leaving the sisters reeling, disgust, anger, and betrayal coursing through them. As they exited, Rathjen's icy, self-satisfied stare followed them. Outside, they found a small crowd of people who had been kicked out of the courtroom. Some were outraged, others curious. A few approached the sisters, offering sympathetic words. "That was insane," said a middle-aged woman with curly hair. "He actually said those horrible things? I thought he'd be more subtle." A man in a baseball cap nodded. "Judge Rathjen's always been a piece of work, but this time he went too far." He cast a worried glance at them. "Watch out. He'll come after you. He's done it before, made people regret challenging him." Elodie exhaled slowly, searching for the right words. "We're not afraid of him," she said simply. Anya, on the other hand, had already begun to dial a number on her phone. "We're contacting a lawyer," she explained, more to Elodie than to the crowd. "We gave Rathjen a chance to do the right thing, but he's made his stance clear." The crowd parted, letting them pass. As they walked away, more voices followed them. "He can't get away with that. Maybe the state's judicial board will do something, right?" In Maplewood's entire history, few had ever taken serious steps to hold Rathjen accountable. He had a fortress of connections, a well-maintained circle of powerful allies who either agreed with him or turned a blind eye to his transgressions. But the twins had reason enough now to fight. They were not going to back down. The sisters headed immediately to the small law office of an attorney named Bianca Mercer, located in a modest brick building near the center of Maplewood. Elodie had come across Mercer's name during her initial research on farmland laws. Mercer had earned a reputation for being tough, ethical, and not easily cowed by local politics. Inside, the office smelled of polished wood and old books. Ms. Mercer, a petite black woman with sharp eyes and a brisk demeanor, ushered them in. "I heard about what happened," she said, motioning for them to sit. "I'm so sorry you had to endure that. Rathjen's bigotry is the worst-kept secret in Maplewood, but no one's been able to dethrone him, so to speak." Anya nodded wearily. "We need help." Mercer clasped her hands. "First, let's address your farmland classification case. You're in the right, legally speaking. Rathjen is applying arbitrary standards, possibly ignoring certain state preservation laws. However, challenging him head-on will be difficult. There's a reason no one has succeeded yet." Elodie and Anya exchanged glances. "We have experience," Elodie said carefully. "We can handle difficulty. We just need to know the steps." Mercer continued. "We can file an appeal with the State Farmland Commission, but that takes time. Meanwhile, you have that 30-day countdown. Yes, you'll be forced to scramble to meet Rathjen's impossible demands. You'll have to get every possible form of proof, soil tests, statements from recognized farmers in Maplewood, anything that can bury them in so much documentation that they can't wave you off." Anya's posture stiffened. "We'll do it. Every last test, every signature, if that's what it takes." Mercer tilted her head. "Then there's the matter of the judge's racist remarks. That's another path, though proving judicial misconduct typically requires a formal complaint with the Judicial Conduct Board. It's a drawn-out process. If he's found in violation, he could be reprimanded or removed, but those boards move slowly. You'd still be under the 30-day pressure. How do we ensure he gets the punishment he deserves?" Elodie asked quietly, but with simmering conviction. Mercer offered a sad smile. "Rathjen is deeply entrenched here, with many allies. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. If you're serious, we'll gather statements from witnesses, transcripts if the court reporter is willing to supply them, and press coverage. It takes a wave of public outrage to move these things along." A flicker of determination lit Anya's eyes. "We can bring that wave." Elodie nodded. "He humiliated us, sure, but that's not even the main point. We can't stand by and let him keep doing this to others." Mercer sat back, impressed. "I like your spirit. I'll represent you on the farmland matter. For the judicial complaint, we'll need to coordinate. Are you certain you're ready for the retaliation?" Elodie's lips pressed into a thin line. "We've seen worse. We'll be fine." A faint curiosity sparked in Mercer's eyes. "You mentioned you served in the army. That's amazing. Thank you for your service." Anya nodded politely. "We're proud to serve, and we're used to dealing with threats that have real teeth. Rathjen is just a bully behind a bench." Mercer nodded, exhaling softly. "Then we'll fight him, step by step." They spent the next several hours mapping out legal strategies, drafting documents, listing possible allies. Any Maplewood farmer who might sign a statement verifying that the farmland had been consistently in use. Anyone who might have heard Rathjen's racist remarks over the years. It was a mountain of tasks, but the sisters felt a renewed energy. They had a plan. As they left Mercer's office, the first hints of dusk settled over Maplewood's quiet streets. Street lamps flickered to life, and the distant hum of crickets accompanied them home. Though drained, they exchanged a confident nod. They had taken the first step in what they knew would be a challenging road. 2 weeks passed, and the fight was in full swing. By day, Elodie and Anya traveled across Maplewood, collecting documents, scheduling soil inspections, meeting with local farmers to gather witness statements. By night, they pored over legal texts, cross-checking farmland statutes with Mercer's guidance. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. People were learning about the twins' backgrounds. Word spread that these young black women had served overseas, had been stationed at Fort Benning for specialized training, and had a repertoire of skills Maplewood had never quite encountered before. A few eyebrows raised. Some townspeople who had previously dismissed them as just troublemakers changed their tune upon learning they were veterans. But there were also those who resented them more for it, fueling the gossip that the sisters thought themselves above everyone else. Judge Rathjen, in a quiet rage, began to press harder. The clerk's office suddenly lost their request forms, forcing them to resubmit. The local agriculture board gave them contradictory instructions. At one point, a soil inspector canceled their appointment the night before, leaving them scrambling to find a replacement. It was clear that Rathjen's network was mobilizing to make their compliance nearly impossible within the 30-day window. Meanwhile, the sisters remained unflinchingly polite yet determined. They would knock on the caretaker's door at dawn, verifying receipts and farm logs. They would drive across county lines to find a state-certified soil inspector who wouldn't be intimidated by Maplewood's local cronyism. They worked from sunrise to midnight, leaning on each other's unwavering presence. The strain was immense, but their army training kicked in. Discipline, resourcefulness, a refusal to surrender under pressure. One afternoon, Elodie was kneeling by a fence on the farmland, methodically checking for damage and taking photographs as part of the documentation. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a call from an unknown number. She answered, expecting another inspector or a local ally. Instead, a snarling male voice spat out, "Drop your complaint. Leave Maplewood, or you'll regret it." She froze. Who is this? The caller hung up. A chill shot through her. Steadying herself, she scanned the horizon of the farmland. Gentle rolling hills, a few scattered trees, nothing threatening in sight. But the threat was real enough. She called Anya immediately. Her sister arrived within minutes, eyes narrowed. "What do you want to do?" Anya asked. Elodie shrugged, refusing to let fear rule her. "We've come too far. We don't back down." Anya nodded grimly. "We've been threatened by worse, and we overcame those too." They had. During their army service, they dealt with mortar attacks, insurgent threats, even infiltration attempts by local militias. The idea of some local small-town bullies trying to scare them off was almost comical in comparison, if not for the seriousness of what was at stake. They reported the incident to Bianca Mercer, who sighed heavily. "Rathjen's network runs deep. I wouldn't put it past him to have associates who try intimidation tactics. Be careful." The sisters stepped up their vigilance. They maintained a watchful eye on the farmland, took turns checking in on each other. They even installed a motion-sensitive camera by the main gate. Meanwhile, the local blogger who had originally tried to stay in the courtroom posted about the hearing. Though he hadn't heard all of Rathjen's racist remarks, he was removed before the worst of it. He relayed the clear tension and suggested that if there were more to the story, the sisters might speak up. At first, the sisters weren't sure they wanted to engage with the press, but Mercer advised them that public scrutiny might be their best defense. "A judge like Rathjen thrives in silence," she warned. "If you let the world watch, he can't hide as easily." Thus, the sisters agreed to a sit-down with the blogger, who ran a small local news site called Maplewood Mirror. They recounted Rathjen's words, the closed session hearing, and his threats of contempt. They didn't mince words about the judge's racism. The story went online. A ripple of shock coursed through Maplewood's residents, especially those who had always suspected Rathjen's prejudices but never seen them so blatantly exposed. More readers commented, sharing their own experiences with Rathjen, stories of prejudicial remarks, arbitrary rulings, suspicious dismissals. A small wave began to form. Maplewood might finally be ready to hold Rathjen accountable. As the last week of their 30-day timeline approached, the farmland was teeming with new activity. Inspectors examining the soil, local agricultural officials verifying the fence lines. The caretaker even offered to run a small demonstration of planting new seeds. Yet, with each day, the tension escalated. Rathjen continued to posture, refusing to sign any official extension. He scheduled a final hearing to review compliance at the end of the month. Rumors abounded that he planned to dismiss any documentation as incomplete. Elodie woke one morning with a knot in her stomach. She stared out the window of the small farmhouse they were temporarily occupying. She remembered the day her grandmother told them about her dream to keep this farmland in the family, how she'd saved every penny to purchase it, determined to pass it to future generations. Elodie recalled how Grandma would proudly recite the history, that when many black farmers were systematically driven off their land, she stood firm. We have to protect it, Elodie thought, her resolve cementing. Anya joined her by the window. We won't lose, Elodie, she exhaled softly. And if Rathjen tries to play dirty, I'm ready to show him we don't scare easy. They shared a determined smile. The day of the final compliance hearing arrived. The sisters dressed in their suits again, this time with the ribbons of their service pinned discreetly to their lapels. They would not boast of their army training, but they would not hide who they were either. Outside the courthouse, a small group of supporters had gathered. Former plaintiffs Rathjen had berated in the past, local community leaders, and even a handful of journalists from neighboring towns. As the sisters climbed the courthouse steps, they felt the hush of the crowd. People parted, letting them pass, offering words of encouragement. Show him he can't do this. Stand strong. Thank you for your service. They nodded politely, hearts pounding. Inside, they found the corridor leading to courtroom B, the same corridor where they had first waited, anxious, weeks ago. This time, though, the tension was different. It was laced with a sense of imminent reckoning. They stepped into the courtroom, heads high. Judge Rathjen entered, expression cold and predatory. Gone was any facade of neutrality. He wasted no time. We're here to see if Miss Elodie Franklin and Miss Anya Franklin have met the burden of proof that their land remains farmland under Maplewood's definitions. He began. Miss Franklin, do you have the documents requested? Elodie rose. Yes, Your Honor. We have soil inspection reports, verified statements from 4 recognized Maplewood farmers, photographic evidence of crop rotation. He waved a dismissive hand. Let me see. One by one, the sisters submitted the documents, each labeled carefully. The judge flipped through them with a sneer. Interesting, but not quite enough to convince me. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Mercer stood. Your Honor, the farmland preservation laws are quite clear. Under Pennsylvania's farmland definitions, these documents are more than sufficient. You have no legal grounds to reject them. Unless I say otherwise. Rathjen roared, losing the veneer of civility. I find these statements questionable. The caretaker has admitted the land went largely unused while these 2 ran off to the army. That alone is enough to break continuity. Elodie's jaw clenched. That caretaker never said any such thing. She turned to Mr. Davies from the zoning committee, who was present to observe. Would you care to clarify, Mr. Davies? Davies cleared his throat. Your Honor, with respect, we have the caretaker's statement that the farmland was indeed used intermittently. Rathjen's gavel came down with a crack. Silence. I don't need the zoning committee contradicting me in my own courtroom. Mercer took a step forward. Your Honor, I strongly object. This is highly improper. I don't care. Rathjen barked. I have broad discretion here, and I say that farmland reclassification stands. Their farmland privileges are hereby revoked pending property tax reassessment. He glowered at Elodie and Anya. You can't strong-arm me with your talk of service and color. This is Maplewood, not some army base where you think you can dash. And that was when Anya lost her composure. She stepped forward, voice shaking with righteous anger. You have no idea how the army works, she said, her voice echoing in the silent courtroom. We spent years protecting the rights of Americans, including yours, only to come home to a corrupt judge who spits on the law. We might have left Maplewood, but we never abandoned this land. You're the one who's out of line. Rathjen smirked. Contempt. Bailiff, take Miss Franklin. Suddenly, a clear, authoritative voice rang out from the back of the courtroom. Stop. All heads whipped around. It was a woman in a conservative suit, flanked by 2 other officials. Judge Rathjen, I am Helena Cox, a representative of the Pennsylvania Judicial Conduct Board. We have received multiple complaints regarding your conduct, including sworn affidavits from numerous parties about your racial bias and intimidation tactics. Rathjen's face turned an alarming shade of crimson. What is the meaning of this? You have no right to barge into my courtroom, Without she cut him off. We do have that right, Judge Rathjen. We're placing you under investigation for judicial misconduct, effective immediately. You are suspended from presiding over this case. A wave of stunned murmurs rolled through the courtroom. Rathjen's eyes bulged. You can't do this. I'm the judge here. Ms. Cox stepped forward. Bailiff, remove Judge Rathjen from the bench. We will not allow him to continue once the board has initiated formal proceedings. The bailiff, who had long been overshadowed by Rathjen, looked anxious but stepped forward. Rathjen tried to protest, I'll have your job, but the bailiff, glancing at Ms. Cox and her two associates, quietly guided him away from the bench. Elodie and Anya stood in shock. A sense of relief and vindication washed over them, but also a numb disbelief. They locked eyes, a silent acknowledgement. Justice had taken a crucial step in their favor. In the chaos that followed, Ms. Cox conferred with the court clerk. Another judge from a neighboring district was immediately contacted to temporarily oversee the farmland case. Meanwhile, Rathjen was escorted out, snarling threats and curses. Mercer approached the sisters, eyes alight. I didn't realize the Judicial Conduct Board would act so quickly, she whispered. They must have received an overwhelming number of complaints, plus strong supporting evidence. The bloggers' articles, the statements from the gallery that day, all of it added up. Mr. Davies from the zoning committee shuffled over, looking equal parts relieved and concerned. Well, I guess that changes things, he said lamely. Elodie took a steady breath. Yes, it does. The new judge, an older man named Judge Thomas Dalton, arrived later that day to the hush of a crowd that had not yet dispersed. He had silver hair and gentle eyes that seemed far more approachable. After a quick review of the documents, he convened the hearing. All right, Judge Dalton said, scanning the farmland records. This seems straightforward. Miss Franklin, I see no reason to deny your farmland classification, particularly with these witness statements and the caretaker affidavits. I rule that the farmland remains farmland under Pennsylvania law. The reclassification attempt is hereby voided. A hush, then applause. Many in the gallery cheered, relief flooding the room. Elodie and Anya felt tears prickle their eyes. Finally, their grandmother's land would stay safe, recognized as farmland. They had won. But the best was yet to come. Over the subsequent weeks, Maplewood buzzed with rumors of the ongoing investigation into Judge Rathjen. The Judicial Conduct Board demanded transcripts of his recent cases. Court reporters turned over records of sessions in which Rathjen had made questionable remarks. People from near and far came forward, sharing stories of his discriminatory rulings. Bit by bit, the facade he had used to terrorize Maplewood for years crumbled. The bloggers' articles went viral in local circles, revealing the judge's meltdown and referencing the sisters' experiences as the tipping point. All of Maplewood braced for a final hearing on Rathjen's misconduct. This took place at a state judicial proceeding in Pittsburgh, where Rathjen was to answer to charges of racial bias, abuse of judicial power, and intimidation. Elodie and Anya received summonses to testify. Though it meant reliving the humiliation, they agreed. The hearing was tense. Rathjen's lawyer tried to discredit them, painting them as aggressive troublemakers. But the sisters answered calmly, detailing his exact words, supported by the sworn affidavits of others who had witnessed the judge's racism. The Judicial Conduct Board also introduced transcripts from the farmland hearing, which documented some of Rathjen's remarks. The court reporter hadn't stopped recording when Rathjen ordered the session closed. In the end, the evidence was damning. The board found Rathjen guilty of egregious misconduct. He was stripped of his judgeship, with the possibility of facing criminal charges for certain abusive practices. For Maplewood, it was a seismic shift. The once untouchable judge had fallen. In the midst of the downfall, the local press finally unearthed more details of the twins' army service. They discovered that both Elodie and Anya had not only served on active duty, but had also undergone the prestigious U.S. Army Ranger School at Fort Benning, an extremely challenging course. Both had become among the relatively few female graduates in the program. They were skilled in advanced combat, reconnaissance, and leadership. When Maplewood learned the full extent of the sisters' training, the response was a mixture of awe and reflection. Two local women had served at the highest levels of the army, risking their lives for a country that still allowed judges like Rathjen to trample them. The sense of shame and gratitude collided, prompting the community to rally around them even more. Anya brushed off the attention modestly. We only did our duty, that's all. But Elodie recognized a symbolic power in letting people know. The best way to combat prejudice is to let them see who we truly are. At the farmland, the sisters felt the sting of leftover tension easing. They decided to hold a small gathering to celebrate the farmland's official recognition under the new paperwork. They invited neighbors, supporters, even members of the local press who had covered their battle. On the day of the gathering, they set up long folding tables and chairs under a large oak tree. Children played nearby while the older folks enjoyed refreshments. Elodie and Anya stood at the center, greeting people. Ms. Mercer arrived, smiling broadly. I hear Rathjen's not just out of a job, he's in legal trouble for some financial improprieties connected to property deals. Might even face jail time. Elodie arched an eyebrow. Couldn't have happened to a more deserving man. Anya sighed. It's not something to celebrate exactly, but maybe it'll teach him a lesson. Mercer's gaze swept across the farmland. Well, you have what you fought for, and Maplewood got rid of a corrupt judge. That's no small victory. Across the yard, a handful of local officials approached, including Mr. Davies. He looked more contrite than ever. Miss Franklin, he greeted somewhat sheepishly. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for the trouble we caused. Sometimes we get caught up in the idea of development and forget that farmland and tradition matter too. Plus, well, Rathjen had a hold on a lot of us. Elodie inclined her head. Apology accepted. But let's do better going forward, Anya added. Indeed. If Maplewood wants to thrive, it can't let bullies run the show. Davies nodded. Agreed. The sisters smiled politely, and the official ambled away. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows, the celebration continued. Soft breezes rustled through the tall grass. Kids chased each other, squealing with joy, while the older guests shared stories at the tables. The farmland felt alive again, a testament to resilience and the power of standing up to injustice. Later, when most guests had departed and twilight draped the farmland in soft purple hues, the sisters ambled to a quiet spot near an old barn. It was the barn where they used to help their grandmother store her tools, where they had shared hushed conversations as teenagers about leaving Maplewood to find their place in the wider world. Now they were back, forging a new chapter. You know, Anya began, leaning against the barn wall. It's surreal. We took on a crooked judge and won. I feel relief, pride, but also a sadness that it had to happen at all. Elodie nodded, gazing at the rolling fields. Grandma always said to never let fear or hatred snuff out our dreams. She stood her ground here, and she wanted us to do the same. We honored her wish. Anya turned to her sister, eyes shining. So what's next? I was thinking, Elodie said slowly. We could actually farm again. Maybe a modest operation at first, organic vegetables, or a small orchard. People in Maplewood might appreciate a new local source of produce. A warm smile crept across Anya's lips. I like that. We can hire local folks, build a real sense of community, show Maplewood that we're not outsiders. We never were. A breeze swept across the field, rustling the tall grass, carrying the sweet scent of earth and the promise of new beginnings. As dusk deepened, the sisters watched the sky turn from orange to pink, then fade into deep indigo. For a moment, they stood in silent reflection, letting themselves finally relax after weeks of relentless struggle. In that quiet, they remembered the dusty roads of foreign deployments, the cramped barracks at Fort Benning, the exhaustion of training, and the pride of graduation. Each memory was a thread woven into their tapestry of resilience. They weren't just two black sisters from Maplewood anymore. They were Army veterans, farmland owners, and the ones who had toppled a corrupt judge. And yet, beneath all those titles, they were still simply Elodie and Anya Franklin, continuing a family legacy on the land they loved. Over the next year, Maplewood changed in subtle but significant ways. With Rathjen gone, the judicial system experienced a long overdue reform. New judges were appointed, local committees re-examined their codes, and more townspeople felt emboldened to stand up for their rights. The farmland remained safely in the Franklin sisters' care, recognized under the Pennsylvania Farmland Preservation Program. Mentioning the real Fort Benning in their local interviews had served to underscore that these sisters were not to be trifled with. Elodie and Anya pushed ahead with their farming plans, restoring the once neglected fields. They planted seasonal crops, setting up a small booth at Maplewood's weekly farmers market. They quickly gained a reputation for quality produce and for their unwavering commitment to the community. Where once they had faced suspicion or outright hostility, now they were greeted with appreciation and respect. The local diner started featuring Franklin Greens in its specials, a small but symbolic nod to the sisters' success. Meanwhile, Judge Rathjen faced the full brunt of karmic retribution. Stripped of his position, embroiled in legal battles, and shunned by the community, he spent his days fighting to salvage what remained of his reputation. Few had sympathy for him. His downfall was widely seen as the rightful consequence of years of bigoted rulings and abuse of power. Perhaps the greatest lesson to emerge from the saga was that while prejudice and corruption can seem invincible, they crumble under the steady pressure of truth, courage, and unity. Elodie and Anya's refusal to be bullied set an example far beyond Maplewood, showing that even in the face of entrenched injustice, determined individuals can prevail. On the farmland itself, an early morning fog drifted across the fields where rows of newly sprouted plants glistened with dew. Elodie walked down an earthen path, checking each row, inhaling the sweet scent of moist soil. Anya was a short distance away, adjusting a drip irrigation line. They worked with an easy rhythm, hands busy but minds at peace. Every so often, they'd pause to share a joke or a memory, the farmland alive with the hum of insects, the songs of birds, and the quiet satisfaction of a life they'd reclaimed through grit and love. Eventually, the sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. Elodie stood and stretched, gazing at the horizon with a hopeful grin. Anya joined her, wiping sweat from her brow. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Anya asked, eyes sparkling. Elodie nodded. "Yeah, we finally did it." And in that moment, a gentle breeze swept across the farmland, carrying with it the echoes of their grandmother's unwavering faith. Yes, they had done it. They stood for justice, preserved their inheritance, and shone a light on Maplewood's darkest corner. Their army training had taught them to fight tirelessly for what was right. Their grandmother's legacy taught them that land could be both a home and a promise. And their victory confirmed that together, they could overcome anything, racist judges included. From that day forward, Maplewood's farmland was more than just fields and crops. It was a symbol of a hard-won battle for dignity and justice, protected by two sisters who, by revealing their U.S. Army training, reminded everyone that true strength lies in standing up for what's right, no matter the odds.